الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on a state of Islam. For may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. أما بعد، يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ولئن متم أو قتلتم لإلى الله تحشرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ali Imran بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ولئن متم أو قتلتم, whether you die or you are killed, you're going to be gathered, all of you, back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this ayah is really profound because it defines for the believer the reality of this life. And to remind us, because in the whole Quran, the view of this world has been defined accurately and precisely for us to be having the full knowledge of the divine guidance to help ourselves to be successful in this life and the hereafter. However, when you read this ayah, whether you die or you're killed, فَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُحْشَرُونَ, you're going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to be all gathered, resurrected, back and standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ayah helps us to understand and remind ourselves that there is nothing greater in the life of a believer to be balanced and to be filled with the blessing than a person to be fully and completely surrendering to Allah and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, the path of the salvation for the believer is the complete submission and the surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a matter of fact, the believer, also everyone, every creature, every human being is facing trials all along their life, and these trials are uncountable. You cannot even count them. And these trials in every kind of a step in your life, kind of a breakthrough into your life. The only way, the only cure to face these, or the healing, or the tool, or the successful tool and the mean that you can use to help yourself in this breakthrough, getting on the right side, getting to be successful, is the istislam to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the full surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say the full surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not in a passive way, because in the practical way means that you're going to be observing patience and observing taqwa. Therefore, when someone is struck by a fear caused by a schemer's plot, or a fear caused by the power of enemy, or difficulties that someone is going through, either in the financial way, health, perspective, or something that is striking some of his, dear ones. The only way for someone to treat and find success through this trial is the full istislam to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're saying that because your istislam to Allah, if this is what is going to help you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for you that amr rashada, the right way of the guidance, the true relief. As you see it, subhanAllah, in the people of the cave, that's what they asked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala: هَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined this law, defined this reality, because when you say it's a law, it's a divine law that is implemented, and it is true for every one of us until the day of judgment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in His Quran, and specifically in this precise and very clarified in the event that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described related to the Battle of Uhud. Here the Prophet ﷺ given boost of comfort in the heart of the believer, saying to them in Surah Ali Imran, أَلَيْ يَكْفِيَكُمْ رَبُّكُمْ أَن يُمِدَّكُمْ بِثَلَاثَةِ آلَافٍ مِّنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مُنزَلِينَ. You'll not be satisfied and enjoyed and joyful and kind of أَلَيْ يَكْفِيَكُمْ is not enough for you, which is me to give you the boost, to give you the strength, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending in the reinforcement of 3,000 of the angels. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this beautiful ayah, which is established for us the law, the divine law, for us to take as a guide in our life and to implement, because whenever you trust it, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfill for you what He has promised you in this ayah. قَالَ بَلَى, certainly, إِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَيَأْتُوكُم مِّن فَوْرِهِمْ هَذَا. If you just observe patience and piety, and they will attack you right away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide you or send down to you 5,000, not only 3,000. But this is just to boost and to put comfort in your heart, because the true victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you see in this ayah, the practical way of the istislam is it just to come to the end of your effort, and you, while you are doing that, you are surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the point when you cannot do anything, that the full submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes. Why? Because you have a complete trust in Allah. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to help you. Therefore, when you think about it, what the Prophet ﷺ had taught us as way of expressing such piety and such taqwa and such istislam, the example of hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of all affairs. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We are from Allah and to Allah to return. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no strength and power except by the leave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these words, all these dhikr are the expression of the piety and the taqwa within the scope of the meaning of the istislam. So when you say, I'm surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm a Muslim, you have to have these two elements and these two aspect of sabr and taqwa, which is the practical way of the meaning of the istislam and the submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you do such a thing in your inevitable trial that you see every day in your life, every year, every month, every part of your life, in every aspect of your life, there is no way for you to have the right tool to help you to go through in a way of success, because every trial is going to have even tamhisun or mahkun. It's either purification or wal-iyadu billah is going to be distraction. Someone bring into themselves ruin. So in that moment, which is really defined of our life, because when someone, especially in this society we live in and the world of today, when we calculate computing the future of our life, we always compute it based on career, based on what you're going to gain, based on family, based on, all the projects, subhanAllah, related to the physical world. But we never think about our life based on trials, which is, subhanAllah, the most obvious thing, but we don't want to see it. It's like we don't want to see it. Therefore, what needs to be the most apparent and the most present into your heart is the way how you're going to surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every test that you're going through. Because when you're talking about tests, even your children talking to you and the way how to answer them, it might be a test. Your relation with your spouse is a test. The relation into your work is a test. The way how you do your life, how you project, how, subhanAllah, it might be like a phone call as a test. A text that you read in the morning spoil all your mood is a test. How can you go through all of that? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given us with this big event to help us bring it down into our life, to help us find that tranquility that Allah guaranteed to you if you are true believers. Therefore, the believer, they have to come to the end of their effort. The end of the effort. And when they come to the end of the effort, when they are going through challenges, they are going through difficulties, they are going through any aspect of their life, even subhanAllah, it might be a challenge to take a decision. And this is when you surrender to Allah. Because when you put all your effort, you invest all your effort seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with patience and piety, and you come to the limit of this effort, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to intervene to help you. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to provide for you the condition where you're going to find your well-being and your wellness. That's when it's going to happen. This is exactly as the example of the dua of the people of the cave. They didn't do it in the beginning where they were laying down in their comfy beds in their palaces. They said it when they are about to get to the cave, because that was their last resort. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا. So the intervention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you when you reach your level or the maximum of your effort, this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. When Allah intervened, the fire with which they want to burn Ibrahim, it became cool and peace. When Allah intervened, the stomach of the belly of the well became the fortress and the guardian, the safeguarder of Yunus alayhi salam. Have you thought about it once? The big problem for Yunus, it got because swallowed by the well. But if you think deeply, you find like the swallowing of the well, it was the way how Allah saved Yunus. Lest he has been, subhanAllah, he would have been drowned. How can someone, subhanAllah, will survive, the storm into the ocean? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the anguish of Yunus that he went through into the belly of the well is the path to relief for Yunus alayhi salam. Because that's when he get back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when he put the maximum of his effort in the remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah saved him from that anguish. And he will do for every believer when they truly correct their relation with him subhanahu wa ta'ala. The splitting of the sea for Musa alayhi salam, it was the last resort, but it was for Musa the way how he was saved and the way how to be empowered. The protection of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his friend Abu Bakr in Al-Ghar, it was the last resort. They were like there, subhanallah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be the greatest victory, or one of the greatest victory. And as he mentioned it, 9 years after the migration, قال إلا تنصروه فقد نصره الله. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him victory back when he was in Mecca, when he was in Al-Ghar. إذ يقول لصاحبه لا تحزن, do not be sad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. Therefore, a believer, when you think about our journey of our life, subhanallah, how can we find the true balance? And this balance cannot be a balance if we do not have peace of mind. That's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again said, and whether you die or you're killed, what is going to happen? Whether you are killed in the sake of Allah or you die, it's not a forgiveness from Allah has a mercy greater than everything and whatever they accumulate. Do you believe in that? Because if someone, subhanallah, he's been struck by a calamity, by a disaster, and he lost everything, homes destroyed, family killed, subhanallah, businesses destroyed, wealth is gone, like our people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to empower them and to free Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in Palestine, Ya Rabbi. Subhanallah, this is what helped them, this mabda, this foundation, this principle. Because if you're gonna die, if you're gonna be killed in the sake of Allah, know that what you're going to get is better than everything else that they're going to have. Better than victory, of course, better than their victory, because their victory is going to lead them to be subhanallah, more spreading corruption in the earth. A victory with which they seek exaltedness in the earth. They seek arrogance. They seek spreading mischief. Is subhanAllah what they're going to accumulate? Wealth? What they're going to accumulate more like, power? And all of that is going to end with death. For this reason, the believer, when he thinks, he said, whether you die or you're going to be killed, you're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the owner of the mercy and the owner of the forgiveness subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, when we say the surrendering to Allah is not just a passive word, an empty word, not a full word that should change the whole being inside us. Because when I say Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sovereign over all His kingdom. And He's the one who knows what is better than for you. Therefore, all what you need to do is be patient and prove piety. And piety, which is mean to fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the extreme of your effort. And when it comes to the extreme, you cannot do anything. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to help you. How can we, when you hold fast to Allah, Allah subhanahu, your heart find tranquility? It's an equation. It's an equation. It's an equation that will never fail. So what is failing when we don't find the tranquility is our holding fast to Allah who is failing. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us like a principle, which is also we can derive it from Surah Al-Imran. قال أولما أصابتكم مصيبة قد أصبتم مثليها قلتم أن هذا. He said, when it happened, you've been struck by a disaster. You saying, from where this is coming for us? أن هذا, how this is happening? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال قل هو من عند أنفسكم. This is from you. It's coming from you. And then the ayah after it قال وما أصابكم, and whatever happened to you in the time of the battle is by the leave of Allah, by the permission of Allah. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to know to make evident among you who are the believers and who are not. Therefore here the principle rely on two main elements. The first element is whenever subhanAllah is struck by disaster, go back, look at yourself, correct yourself. There is a defect in you. Don't say, why this? أَنَّ هَذَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. And Allah talking to the companions, when Allah ta'ala alayhim, the best people of this generation of Islam, of all the generation of Muslims. And then the second element, how can you bring the proof to Allah that you are a believer? That's the truth subhanAllah challenge. قَالَ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to know among you who truly believe. Therefore the test, if it happened, a disaster, there is something wrong with us. Just correct it. But then you have to turn and you striving strong to bring to Allah the proof, Ya Allah, I am a believer. How can you say prove a believer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Says, I am a believer by bringing the proof of sidq. And this is what the companions, they have understood. Because even though after being wounded, and some of them, they cannot even walk. They went back to the battle in Hamra al-Asad. They went back. What does it mean? It had a power, a physical power, a material power. No, the power was in the heart. It was like an astounding power, a supernatural power. Is a power in the heart and the soul, is a power in the iman and the surrendering to Allah. The companions, they understood, they surrendered to Allah, Allah will help them. I cannot walk, Allah will help you. I cannot even lift a finger, Allah will help you. Is this not the Prophet ﷺ who told you to come out? Yes, then Allah will take care of you. الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح. They answered the call of the messenger, Allah and messenger, after they have been wounded. Why? Because they know the meaning of we are talking about. And they went there, and there has been, subhanAllah, people that want to scare them. And the people that gather against you, what they said? They said exactly what we have said. That beautiful statement which is expressed their piety and patience, and they surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. And awkwardly, amazingly, when I say awkwardly, because according to the calculation of the people of the dunya, this should not happen. But when you have the power that you are building, it is a divine power, then yes, it does. قال it increased their iman. It increases their iman, it increases their faith, it increases their resolve, it increases their determination, it increases their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we today emulate those great people? How can we be on the path to be like them? It's two elements which really kind of define a principle for all of us, and yet derived from the Book of Allah. The first principle, which is both of these elements constituting this principle, require for us not to understand them only, and not to know about them, and not only to believe in them, but to embrace them, to have them be soaked in our heart, so it becomes like part of us. So the action becomes like an obvious action, becomes like, subhanAllah, spontaneous action. The first thing that we need to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a law called the law of distinction, of differentiating between the good and the evil. Along your journey of your life, Allah will test you constantly, continuously. Are you a good believer or not? قال ما كان الله ليذر المؤمنين على ما أنتم عليه. Allah was not going to leave the believer as you are, till He will make the distinction, till He will make the trial to differentiate between the good, the pure one, and the not pure one. Therefore, when you embrace this law, then your life journey is not going to be based on the physical or on the material dreams, but you're going to be, every time you have a trial, either at work or at the university, or while, subhanAllah, you're walking outside, or within your family, or while you're driving, just take it. Allah is testing you. Are you good or evil? And you'll not be able to know what is going to happen to you. You're not going to say, if I do this, this is going to happen. No. The believer only sees with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why He said, وَإِن تُؤْمِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا. If you believe and you prove piety, then you will have the great success. You will have the greatest of the reward. So we coming back to the istislam, the surrendering can only stand only when we have that piety and patience. The second, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned toward the end of Surah Ali Imran, قَالَ لَتُبْلَوُنَّ. You're going to be tested into yourselves and into your wealth, and you're going to hear a hurtful speech from the people of the book before you, and from those who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What you gonna do when you hear this hurtful speech? And we do. قَالَ وَإِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا. But you are patient and pious. That's it, the meaning of the surrendering to Allah. قال ذلك من عزم الأمور. That is the great resolve. That is what makes you to have that great determination and strong believer. The second point, dear brother, respected sister, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you, whether you die or you killed, the forgiveness from Allah and the mercy is greater than whatever they accumulate. Ask yourself then, what is the place of the forgiveness of Allah in your heart? This is the core actually. Because the first one, to be ahead of it, to be thinking of it, you cannot think of it if you have still not good relation, if I'm going to say not good perception or the right view toward the forgiveness. How do you view forgiveness? How big forgiveness to you? Is it dearer to your heart than the fresh water in time of dire thirst? Is it greater to you than everything in this life? This is, dear brother, respected sister, we're talking about the forgiveness which is given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a gift for you, which is going to enable you to be closer to Allah and enable you to be admitted in the mercy of Allah. Therefore, ask yourself how big forgiveness is in your heart. Because if when I say, Ya Allah, forgive me, I say it in a very casual way, I say it, if I have something else, if someone is going to give you some money, you turn and you run to that and you forget about asking for the forgiveness, then we have a serious problem. Why? Because the serious problem will not be able to observe the piety and to observe the patience. Why? Because the core of the thing for which if we die, Allah will confer it to you, it's not that big in our heart. It's not our big. So if today we die, that's when someone in the intoxication of death, he will understand how great is forgiveness. But we need to understand it beforehand, before that moment. And this is only how we will be able to be on the path of the great generation of the Sahaba, when we elevate the forgiveness to be dearer to us than everything else. And it is indeed the sign and the token and the proof of your iman and the proof of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can you say, I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and which is mean you want to be nearer to Him, when forgiveness it does not have that utmost place in your heart? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. Dear brother, respected sister, truly the practical and profound and active and dynamic surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the solution for all our aspects and challenges that we are going through in this journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained to us. Just think and reflect of one of the stories that I have mentioned. When Allah intervened, the fire became cool and peace. Was it only for Ibrahim alayhi salam? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us from Ummah of Muhammad that such a thing happened to him. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was waiting for him to hug him and said, Alhamdulillah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showed me with my own eyes someone that Allah gifted him and honored him as He honored Ibrahim alayhi salam. So these are sunan when we say laws, which is not only the Quran for those people who passed, no, it's for you. So it's given to you, it's helping you. This is tools and means and gift and blessing for all of us. But how can we truly be ahead, mindful, aware of what we have mentioned? How can we know and try to be mindful of the fact that every time that you're going through a trial, a disaster struck you, you're going to think about, this is a test for me. I need to be firm and subhanAllah, perseverant and steadfast. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me. And the second one is like, I build the forgiveness. We should cry for the forgiveness. Today is the first day of Sha'ban, and the preparation for Ramadan starts today. You should have started a long time ago, but today, you're not going to prepare for Ramadan in the night of Ramadan. So the preparation of Ramadan starts in Sha'ban. And what is the preparation? The best preparation is the topic of today. It is not Ramadan is the month of the forgiveness. So if forgiveness does not have a big place in your heart, truly big place, you love it, you die for it. That's what it means. For what it means, you truly die for it. That's how you're going to appreciate Ramadan. That's how you're going to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Ramadan. And that's how, inshallah, you're going to have this showering of blessing. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to reach Ramadan. Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. The last thing that it can wrap everything together to help us be ahead of things, to be mindful, is to correct our position toward death. Yes, death. Because subhanallah is a reality for all of us. We avoiding it. We don't want to think about it. We neglect it. وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ مِنْهُ تَحِيدٌ. The intoxication, death came with the truth. This is what you're trying to avoid. We're talking about believers, not people. The other people, they don't even think about it. They think that they are living for eternity. Avoiding it. قُلْ لَنْ يَنْفَعَكُمُ الْفِرَارِ. Say it will not help you to flee. It's either whether you flee from death or from killing, you're going to be enjoyed for a while in this dunya, and again you're going to die. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم. The death that you are trying to escape, He's going to meet you. He's meeting you. And subhanAllah, correcting our relation with death, that's the key for all, subhanAllah, that let's say rejuvenation of the iman in our heart to really make the true meaning or to live the true meaning of the surrendering and the submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to correct and to look at death as something good, as something, as the vessel to see Allah. Because again, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَالَ وَلَئِن قُتِلْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ مُتُّمْ, if you are whether killed or died. So which is mean there is no access to the forgiveness only if we know that death is coming, we value death, we have a good relation with death, because again death is not the end of the desires, the desire of the dunya, but the beginning of the greatest bliss. And the greatest of all is to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma ballighna ya Ramadan ya Rabbal Alameen. Allahumma ighfir lana dhunubana ajma'een. Allahumma tahhir qulubana ya Kareem. Allahumma nawwir qulubana bil iman. Allahumma arzuqna al yaqeen ya Arhamar Rahimin. Allahumma ya muqallib al qulubi thabbit qulubana ala dinik. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم انصر إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين. اللهم حرر الأقصى يا رب العالمين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.